That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him again and again and again.
At 71, Michael Anthony breaks the silence he kept for half a lifetime. For years, fans believed they knew the story of Van Halen, but Anthony's revelation about Eddie Van Halen paints a very different picture. Was their story one of brotherhood gone wrong, or a rivalry that never healed? The truth, hidden for decades, is finally out. Van Halen was not just your regular type of rock band. At their peak, in the 80s and early 90s, they were the band everyone couldn't stop talking about. They sold out arenas packed with screaming fans, topped the charts with albums that sold millions, and redefined what a rock group could be. They created a sound so powerful it became more than music. It was a cultural force that people believed would last forever. From the outside, Van Halen looked like a brotherhood built on talent and success. But behind the spotlight, the cracks were already forming. After decades of loyalty, Michael Anthony, the man who had been there from the very beginning and helped carry the band's legacy, suddenly found himself left out of the decisions that shaped its future. This was not the kind of betrayal that makes headlines. It was silent, more personal, the kind that creeps in slowly until one day you realize the door has been closed and you are no longer on the inside.
No, unfortunately, Eddie and I never had a chance to really, settle any differences that we had in the past or whatever, but...
However, before we get into the betrayal and why the fallout was so devastating, we need to rewind and understand who Michael really is, where he came from, what shaped him, and why his story will always be tied to both the rise and the unraveling of Van Halen. From California to Arcadia, early years. Born June 20th, 1954 in Chicago, Illinois, into a household where music was part of everyday life, Michael Anthony Sobolewski grew up surrounded by sound. His father played the trumpet, and the echoes of rehearsals often filled their home. Naturally, Michael picked up the trumpet too, eager to follow in his father's footsteps and carry on the family's love for music. In 1966, the family moved west to Arcadia, California, a change that would shape the rest of Michael's life. At his new school, he joined the marching band and immediately discovered he enjoyed performing in front of other students. At this point, music was no longer just a hobby he had picked up at home. It had become a part of his everyday life. Being in the marching band gave him structure and confidence. In high school, Michael explored different activities and even showed promise as a basketball player, but his love for music always came first. The trumpet, his first instrument, gradually gave way to guitar and bass, instruments that captured the raw energy of the rock and roll he was discovering. They spoke to him in a way the trumpet never had, offering freedom and a chance to create something larger than himself. After graduating in 1972, Michael left behind marching bands and school gyms and stepped into the local music scene. He played in small clubs, at parties, and in community halls. These early gigs were modest, but they taught him an essential lesson on how to connect with an audience. He joined bands where he could experiment with his sound, develop his style, and learn the rhythm of playing as part of a group. Little did anyone know, a young musician from Pasadena was about to step into a whirlwind of fame, talent, and tension that would change rock history forever. It was during this formative period that Michael met a young band called Van Halen from Pasadena. The group was already turning heads locally with their high-energy, technically sharp sound. At the center was Eddie Van Halen, the brilliant guitarist whose innovative solos were impossible to ignore. Alex Van Halen, Eddie's older brother, kept the rhythm on drums with precision and power. David Lee Roth, the lead singer, commanded attention with his stage presence and vocal range. The band needed a bassist who could anchor the rhythm, provide vocal harmonies, and keep up with their rapidly growing ambitions. Michael was exactly the right person for the role. His experience, humility, and natural talent made him more than just a musician. He became the steady hand that kept the band grounded. He added depth to their sound, harmonized seamlessly with Roth's soaring vocals, and created a backbone for Eddie's explosive guitar work. Michael's joining Van Halen marked the beginning of a partnership that would soon leave a lasting mark on rock music. Together, Michael, Eddie, Alex, and Roth would create a sound that was tight, energetic, and unforgettable. Every member added something special, but it was Michael's calm presence and unique skill that helped the band truly shine. Van Halen's big break came in 1977 when their electrifying energy finally stormed into Hollywood, catching everyone's attention. Their live shows were electric, full of precision, fire, and raw talent. And it wasn't long before Warner Brothers Records took notice. Executive Mo Austin and producer Ted Templeman caught the band at the Starwood Club and were completely blown away by what they saw, a sound and stage presence unlike anything else in rock at the time. By 1978, Van Halen had released their self-titled debut album. Songs like Running with the Devil, Ain't Talkin' 'Bout Love, and Eddie's jaw-dropping solo Eruption announced a new era. Michael's bass lines kept the song steady, but it was his harmonies that gave the music its rich, full sound, becoming a signature element of the Van Halen experience that fans quickly came to recognize and love. Michael never tried to outshine Eddie's guitar or Roth's dramatic stage performance. While Eddie played electrifying solos and Alex drove the drums with power, Michael kept the band grounded. Even if people didn't always notice him, his role was unique and important. He just wasn't the type to show off, and he wasn't interested in fame. By the early 1980s, Van Halen had become a global phenomenon with multi-platinum albums. They sold out arenas, and worldwide fame became part of everyday life. For Michael, it was the fulfillment of a dream. He was playing music he loved, sharing a brotherhood on stage, and living a life most people could only dream of. And to him, that was more than enough. But he would soon discover that he was living in a lie. The brotherhood he trusted was about to turn on him, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Golden Era and the Fallout, Brotherhood versus Betrayal. As Van Halen's fame grew, the cracks within the band started to show. David Lee Roth wanted more control. Eddie Van Halen was determined to push boundaries, and Michael often felt stuck in the middle. He wasn't just playing bass, he was trying to keep the peace between two very strong personalities, pulling the band in opposite directions. In 1985, David Lee eventually left the band, leaving fans and critics wondering if the band could survive such a major change. That's when Sammy Hagar stepped in as the new lead singer. Many expected challenges, but Michael and the rest adjusted quickly. Interestingly, Michael developed a strong friendship with Hagar, and their voices blended naturally, creating a fresh sound that brought new energy to the band. The first album with Hagar, 5150, was released in 1986 and immediately debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, a milestone that marked Van Halen's first chart-topping album. Michael's harmonies were more prominent, his bass lines tighter than ever, and the band's chemistry felt renewed. 5150 proved that Van Halen could evolve while staying true to the electrifying energy that had made them famous. However, after a while, things in the band began to shift again. Eddie began taking more control over the music, and Michael was sometimes asked to record his bass parts alone, away from the others. It was a silent way of keeping him out of the creative process. On the business side, Eddie and Alex set up a corporation that gave them full control over the band's name and money. Slowly, Michael was left out of important decisions, even though his bass lines and harmonies were still the backbone of Van Halen's sound. Despite everything, Michael stayed loyal. Of course, he wasn't oblivious to what was happening, but he never spoke against the band in public. On stage, he brought the same energy and focus to every performance. Fans also noticed when he was missing from promotional photos or when his name was left off credits. But he continued performing with professionalism, even as tensions grew and relationships within Van Halen became strained. By the late 1990s, Van Halen was facing challenges. Sammy Hagar had left the band, David Lee Roth returned briefly and then departed again, and Michael found himself pushed further to the sidelines. At the same time, Eddie's struggles with alcohol had become widely known, and his health had grown fragile after a battle with tongue cancer. Additionally, Eddie was also unhappy with Michael's friendship with Sammy Hagar, who had left the band and become one of Eddie's most vocal critics. Eddie saw their friendship as a betrayal, while Michael felt he was simply being loyal to a friend. Meanwhile, The band that had once seemed unstoppable now faced uncertainty. Members were drifting in different directions, and the magic that had once held them together was starting to fade. In 2004, it seemed like Van Halen was getting a fresh start with a reunion tour featuring Sammy Hagar. Fans had been waiting years for this moment, and it felt like the band was finally coming back together. But behind the scenes, things were far from ideal for Michael. To take part in the tour, he had to give up his rights to the Van Halen name and logo. His face was removed from promotional photos, and his name disappeared from merchandise. While the rest of the band cashed in, Michael was handed a paycheck and treated like a hired hand. After dedicating decades to the band, it felt like Eddie was trying to erase Michael from Van Halen's history. As if all that wasn't enough, Eddie began grooming his son, Wolfgang Van Halen, to take Michael's place, without having a proper conversation with Michael or even the courtesy of a proper farewell. One day, Michael was the bassist, and the next, Wolfgang was in his spot. For fans who had grown up with Michael's harmonies, it felt like watching a family silently replace one of its own. Legally, leaving the band had serious consequences for Michael. By signing away his rights, he had no control over how Van Halen used his name, his image, or his history. The band could repackage his work without his permission, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. For fans, it felt harsh, but for Michael, it was just the reality he had to accept. After Michael Anthony stepped away, Van Halen never quite felt the same. The band continued, but the steady pulse of their music, the bass lines and harmonies that had given every song its depth, was missing. What does it take to survive such a lifetime of betrayal? Could Michael Anthony ever reclaim his place and finally receive the recognition he truly deserves? Comeback and the reunion that never was. Despite all the drama and betrayal, Michael never went to the press to lash out or criticize Van Halen. Instead, he picked himself up, focused on moving forward, and most importantly, kept making music. He went on to form Chickenfoot, a rock supergroup with Sammy Hagar, guitar virtuoso Joe Satriani, and Chad Smith, the powerhouse drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They released 2 albums, toured across the globe, and proved that Michael was far from done. His bass line still hit with precision, his voice soared as it always had, and fans were thrilled to see him perform, free from the shadows and drama of Van Halen. Michael Anthony didn't just focus on music, he also built a personal brand that reflected his personality and passion, called Mad Anthony's Cafe.
Michael Anthony from Van Halen and Sammy Hagar and Chickenfoot has got a sauce called Mad Anthony's, original fire in a bottle.
The brand includes hot sauces, barbecue rubs, and rock-inspired merchandise. Its name comes from his nickname, Mad Anthony, earned during Van Halen's early days for his fiery stage presence and bold bass playing. Fans embraced the brand not just for the flavors, but for the connection it offered. Each product carried a piece of Michael's energy, humor, and spirit, giving people a taste of the man behind the music. Mad Anthony's Cafe became more than just a brand. It became a symbol of independence. While Eddie Van Halen had tried to erase Michael's place in the band's story, Michael was writing a new chapter on his own terms. He even joked in interviews that his hot sauce was spicier than any Van Halen reunion, a playful comment that carried a hint of the deeper sting behind the humor. In 2014, Michael and Sammy Hagar launched a new project, Sammy Hagar and the Circle, joined by guitarist Vic Johnson and drummer Jason Bonham, son of Led Zeppelin legend John Bonham. Their debut studio album, Space Between, climbed to number 4 on the Billboard 200, proving Michael was still reaching new heights decades into his career. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, the band recorded Lockdown 2020 remotely, reimagining rock classics with the same fire and camaraderie that defined Michael's journey beyond Van Halen. His bass line stayed steady, his voice remained timeless, and his energy never wavered. Despite his success with new projects, rumors of a Van Halen reunion never faded. Fans clung to the hope that one day the classic lineup, Michael included, would share the stage again. But those hopes were cut short on October 6, 2020, when Eddie Van Halen passed away, ending any chance of the reunion and marking the close of a chapter that could have been. For Michael, the loss was devastating. He shared a heartfelt tribute, honoring Eddie's genius and the years they had spent on stage together. There was no bitterness, no blame, only respect, sorrow, and love. But behind that tribute lay a deeper pain. Michael had never had the chance to speak with Eddie again before his death. He had hoped for a simple reconciliation, a conversation, even if it was not about the band, but just two old friends sitting down to talk about life. That unspoken conversation became one of the most important moments in Michael's story. For many years, his relationship with Eddie had been full of ups and downs, with both loyalty and conflict. In the end, all Michael wanted was a chance for closure. After Eddie passed away, Wolfgang Van Halen confirmed that a reunion had actually been planned. They had been working on it, and it was going to be something really special, something fans had hoped to see but never would. The reunion that never happened is one of rock's biggest what-ifs. What if Eddie and Michael had made peace? What if the original lineup had come back for one last tour to make history? The truth is, that moment will never come, and we can only imagine what could have been. Present life and legacy. Today, at 70, Michael Anthony stands as more than just a rock icon. He has endured, stayed true to his craft, and carried himself with silent strength. His journey has spanned the dizzying highs of Van Halen's superstardom and the painful lows of betrayal and being cast aside. But through it all, he never walked away from music. Instead, he proved time and again that his place in rock history is undeniable. Of course, the years he spent in Van Halen left their mark. He felt the heartbreak of being pushed aside, the sting of seeing his contributions silently erased, and the deep regret of never fully reconciling with Eddie Van Halen. But despite all the pain, he still looks back on much of the journey as a dream come true. It takes him back to being just a kid from Pasadena, playing music for the world, feeling like life itself was a fairy tale. This combination of excitement and lessons learned the hard way has guided him through every chapter of his life. What makes Michael truly remarkable is how he handled and carried himself after everything that happened. When bandmates criticized him or downplayed his role, he never went to the press to fight back. He stayed above the drama, focused on his music, and let his work speak for itself. That silence, sometimes mistaken for weakness, became a sign of real strength. By refusing to tear anyone down, he silently built a reputation for integrity that extends far beyond the stage. Michael's influence goes far beyond Van Halen.
I don't get the feeling he would want you to be him.
No, he never did.
Right?
He enjoyed playing with me. That was one of his favorite things, and it was a big reason why.
Wolfgang Van Halen has often praised him, calling him one of the greatest bassists of his generation and acknowledging the unfair treatment he faced. Their connection has become a bridge between the past and the future. Michael has supported Wolfgang's journey with guidance and encouragement, proving that respect and mentorship can help heal even the most fractured histories. Michael's career after Van Halen shows he is far from done. With projects like Chickenfoot and Sammy Hagar and The Circle, he continues to tour, release albums, and perform for fans around the world. On stage, his energy is still electric, his harmonies strong, and his connection with the audience unshakable. He hasn't just revisited old hits, he has built new successes, earning respect on his own terms. Michael has also widened his impact beyond the stage. He mentors young musicians, supports charitable projects, and uses his hard-earned experience to guide others on their own journeys. More than anything, Michael has become a symbol of wisdom, showing the power of forgiveness, the strength in letting go of grudges, and the importance of focusing on what truly matters. His life reminds us that loyalty, dignity, and silent strength often outlast fame itself. Now, over to you. Do you think Michael Anthony will ever be celebrated as he should for building Van Halen's legacy? Or has he already proven through his later success that recognition from the past no longer matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.